Hello and welcome back to the 46 of 46 podcast. This week, I am back with an exciting summit session where we are going to merge two entirely different aspects of my life, the Adirondacks and filmmaking. 10 years ago, director Blake Cortright released the 46ers film, a feature-length documentary film about how the 46 High Peaks transform people inside and out. I've seen it. It is a fantastic movie. And this summer kicks off the 10th anniversary screening series for the film. So it's coming back to theaters, and what a great year to do it. Blake is with me today to talk all about the film, from the filmmaking process in the High Peaks, the challenges like carrying a camera crane up to the top of Cascade, and the 10th anniversary re-release, and much more. He's live with me here at Shed Quarters. Blake, welcome to the 46 of 46 podcast.
Hey James, thanks for having me. It's fun to be in Shed Quarters in the flesh.
Yes, you certainly are. Here we are in my little nook, my little slice of heaven here in the Adirondack Park. Welcome.
We love it. Thanks.
And I'll tell you, it's the first time there's been not just cameras, but lights here set up in Shed Quarters. So it's exciting stuff. We are doing it big for Blake. This is the 10-year re-release of the 46ers. So what's that been like for you?
Man, it's been fun. I realized it was coming up last year, which was kind of crazy to think that 10 years of my life have passed since I completed and released this thing that took 3 years of my life to make, right? And last summer, we actually did a limited screening at one of our theaters in Rome, New York, because it was their 10th anniversary, and we were their third top-selling film of all time.
Awesome.
And then after they showed it for that limited run again, we were their second top-selling film of all time. So that felt pretty satisfying. And I was like, all right, this could work. I think we could bring it back to theaters because people have streamed it. We've sold DVDs and Blu-rays, but as I'm sure you're well aware, in the last 10 years, the number of 46ers has doubled.
Yeah.
So I'm like, the audience is there. And I think people are looking for that communal experience of going to the theater. I don't know about you, but like I like streaming. I like watching stuff on my couch, but there's really something special and unique about not just the bigness of the screen and the sound, but experiencing the emotions and the journey in a room full of strangers, and everybody kind of laughs or gasps at the same time, or you ride this emotional roller coaster together. To me, that's what I love. One of the things I love about filmmaking.
Yeah, you don't get into filmmaking if like the going to the movie theater isn't a massive part of your life. Like that's really what attracts people to that world. You know, you and I both work in the film industry. Like we know this. This is why this is exciting to talk, not just like logistics of how you made this film, but also like the subject matter. So it just makes sense to do a podcast about this. And I'm excited to talk about both aspects of this process. So first off, kudos to you for not only like putting yourself out there, tackling a story like the 46ers, and actually seeing something through start to finish. I know, I've worked in the film industry for 18 years. It is a long process to do something. And for you to tackle something, especially, you did this film when you were a college student, you were a film student. Yeah. And to not just, do your homework, right? Like your projects for school, you actually embarked on an actual film. You saw it through to the end. You came up, you shot it, you fundraised, you did the film, you edited it, you had it distributed. Like dude, kudos again to you. Like thanks, people don't really understand what it's like to put yourself out there in terms of like making content for people, but to actually do something that no one's making you do and you just want to see it through. You want to tell a story. I mean, this whole podcast literally exists because I wanted to tell a story.
Yeah.
And it's crazy where it goes. So, nothing but respect for you for putting this out there. And I've seen the film and you did a fantastic job. So let's kind of like start at the beginning here. What was your inspiration? So you're a college student. You were going to college in Virginia. I know you're from like the Albany area. So obviously you're familiar with the Adirondacks, but to have this idea being a college student, but then actually say, no, let's do it. Like take to me about, let's get to the origin. Like what led to you saying, this is a story I want to tell?
Yeah. So I started in 2008 when I was still in Boy Scouts. I was still in high school or middle school. I don't even remember what I was at that point, but we went and hiked Giant Mountain for our hiking merit badge, but we had to make it a 10-mile hike. So we did the loop where you start across from Chapel Pond and then you come around the backside of Giant. And I remember it just leveled us. We were like, And I was young and sprightly. The adults in the room were definitely hurting. By the time we got out at like 10 o'clock at night, went to, I don't even remember which restaurant in Keene Valley. It was one of the only ones that was open that late on like a Saturday night. And I remember the impression that left on me though, because to that point, my only Adirondack experience had been summers up on the YMCA camp in Lake George, Silver Bay, which was gorgeous, awesome. But those hikes are nothing like the high peaks.
Sure.
So then summer of 2012, my father, my brother, and I decided we were going to go hike Marcy, Tabletop, and Phelps one day, and then camp out by Marcy Dam at a lean-to. And then the next day we were going to hike Algonquin, Iroquois, and Wright. Well, we got humbled. We went out and we did get Marcy, and we got Tabletop. And I remember looking through the treed and summit at Tabletop, like, well, okay, this is fine. And then the next day we were trying to do Algonquin, Iroquois, and Wright. And subsequently I've realized the only way to do that, well, maybe not, but the way that works for me is to do Wright on the way back. We didn't do that. We did Wright first. And we just looked up at Algonquin. I'm sure many a person has stood there with the intent to hit those three, and you're tired on the summit of Wright looking up at this giant looming over you. And you're like, yeah, that not today. So we turned back. But through that experience, that was after my freshman year, I was going to go back to college. I was captivated by a couple things. One, just how physically demanding it actually was, especially at that age. You know, you're 18 years old. You think you can conquer the world.
Yeah, you think you're invincible, for sure.
To realize very quickly that you're not, I think is a very important lesson. And I got a big spoonful of humble pie.
Amen.
And then
the
we sat on the
mountains are
summit.
good for that, right? Giving you that humble pie. They serve it up every day.
Just kept coming for 3 years, man. And it was good. But then when I was on Marcy, I got one little corner to myself, and it's the side where you're looking at and you can see haystack on your left, skylight on your right, and just that open wilderness. You don't see any roads. You don't see any human structures from that particular vantage point. And that just captivated my imagination. From the time I've been like 5 or 6 years old, I've had this visual style that's impacted by the historical epics of the 50s and 60s. So I love big sweeping landscapes. I love the Lord of the Rings movies. So to me, I was like, oh, I'm like in Middle Earth right now. And I wanted to capture that feeling. So that was the impetus. And then it got into, the views are beautiful, but like Tabletop was kind of grueling for not much reward. And I know that's hardly the only forested summit. So I was like, why do people do this? Like, what keeps you going through 46 of these things, especially people that have had injuries, especially people that have dealt with really inclement weather, or, maybe safety scares with hypothermia or frostbite or something else. And I was like, why do people do this? So that kept mulling in my brain as I went back to college. And then in my fall break, I met with my mentor who had been at the PBS station in Albany and now was in Plattsburgh, kind of managing the programming. And I pitched him on this idea. And he said, all right, if you do it, we'll air it.
Oh,
so, and because he'll supervise and make sure that I like hit the things I need to hit.
Sure.
To be
so you
ready.
Pitched him this idea for a film.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, we'll air it if you shoot it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I knew I had at least one spot for it to live. And then I put together the Kickstarter, but it was funny. I mentioned doing this to my parents and they were like, well, Blake, you have no money. You don't have any film equipment and you have no job. And you're a full-time student in Virginia and you got to keep your grades up to keep your scholarship because you can't afford to go to college. And fortunately, I was able to do it without debt. But I said, no, I'm gonna do a Kickstarter. And, having been, as you mentioned, in the content world, early on, that was amazing because MFA students and senior portfolios, like people couldn't even raise $2 or $3 grand to get their student films done. So everybody kind of scoffed at me when I came out there and I said, I'm going to, raise $12,250 in 35 days. However, I was strategic. I knew what I was doing because I knew there was a passionate audience. And if I could connect to those people, I knew I could pull it off. I wasn't just telling my introspective thoughts on reality as an 18-year-old.
It wasn't your film noir, student film, crappy student film that college students are making. It was actually a film that there was an audience and people wanted. It wasn't like I didn't go to college for film. I went for television production, but many friends that were in the film program, and it's like every film student wants to be Quentin Tarantino, and it's like, sorry, no one cares about your film. No one cares about your idea of trying to be a Quentin Tarantino ripoff. But your film, you were smart because you knew that there was a story beyond anything else that needed to be told, and an audience that will want to see that story, want to hear it. So
Yeah.
again, you were thinking far beyond your years. So much respect for that.
I've been blessed with many great mentors over the years. I credit all of that maturity. Any maturity beyond my years has always been just the benefit of people who are 5, 10, 20, 30 years ahead of me in my career, who were giving me advice and helping steer away from my 18-year-old impulses, which was great because then this film, like I really grew up making it because from 18 to 21, I spent most of my time that I wasn't in class or like in my extracurriculars or my part-time jobs at that point later on, like working on this thing. And
doing it. Yeah. Doing the thing that you're in college to do, but you're doing it. Like that's the thing. You're actually out doing it, which, you know, again, is like having someone who's been in that world, just people wait to do it. It's like, no, you could literally make your movie right now. So awesome stuff. So having that sort of mentor, I'm assuming he probably helped you, you know, you said he kind of like helped you check some boxes and stuff. Like he kind of helped guide like how the story needs to go. So it would go on PBS ultimately. Okay.
Yeah, so he gave me some structural pointers, and then when it came to the edit, he was really helpful. We actually sat down a couple weeks ago and talked about this, and I said the thing he told me that really stuck with me was the phrase "kill your darlings" when it comes to because directors, I'm sure you've seen this. Directors get in love with a shot or a story beat, and it doesn't serve the story when you get in the edit, and you need that executive producer. Or in this case, he was actually acting as a regular producer, not just the bank. And you need that person to come in and say, this isn't serving the story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why directors have producers, because you get you need that outside, like non-emotionally connected person, especially in anything creative. Yeah. So it's good to have that. Good to have that. So now, I know we probably should have started with this, but you know, we're just this podcast. It's the Wild West, dude.
I love it.
For people who aren't familiar with your film, give us a little background of, you know, what's the log line. Give us a little introduction as to what the film is if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, so it's a 65-minute. I call it a documentary epic because I shot it. I really didn't reference a lot of contemporary documentary, and I think when you watch it, people will feel that it doesn't flow. It definitely doesn't feel like Netflix. It feels a little more classical in its approach. My visual references were Lawrence of Arabia, Lord of the Rings. I wasn't doing a lot of like, oh, I'm going to try to learn from these other documentaries. And that, you know, in some ways that was a strength. In other ways it was a challenge. But the story is, it's a love letter to the Adirondacks. Like even if you're not a 46er, you don't care about hiking, I think you'll love the film. If you are a 46er or aspiring, or you love hiking, I think you'll really love the film because it ties to the experience of the people who do it. Ultimately, it seeks to answer what transforms ordinary men and women into the legendary 46ers. And it does so in this way that I think, at least it was my intention, to respect the mountains, to respect the 46ers organization and the other organizations that support the conservation of our resources here and safe and responsible trail management, and also, you know, safety for the people that are out there, because the mountains, as you've talked about and we've talked about, the mountains don't care about you. And if you break your leg out there, the mountains aren't going to help you out. Like they can transform I think be really transformative for your mind and your spirit, but and obviously physically too. But yeah, if you get hurt out there, they're not coming to your rescue.
No.
So
no, it's completely the case. Yeah. So having gone through this process that it took you 3 years the film was a 3-year process for you from like shooting it to editing it. I would imagine that not only from you must have learned more about creating a film on that 3-year process than you did in film school.
Yeah.
It's what most people will do if you actually go do. Yeah. But you must have gone on a transformative journey yourself during that time, because of the mountains, not in the mountains, but because of them. And I remember, I don't know if it's in the film. Is it in the film where you talk about changing the title of the name, or did I see it in like an interview with you?
Yeah, probably that.
Yeah, it's probably an interview. So you were originally calling it Conquering the 46.
Conquering the
Adirondacks. And I remember reading an interview with you. And you said, as you were doing the film, you realized like, that's not what people do. Yeah. And dude, that spoke to me so much when I read that you realized while making the film that it's a different perspective. And I thought that was so awesome because you do not conquer anything. In fact, whenever you see the word conquer and having anything to do with the outdoors, it's you see it from brands, you see it from companies, it's an immediate turn off for me personally, because that's where like part of the mountains don't care about you is like part of where it's kind of like the going against that thought process that you conquer anything out there. So what was kind of the moment, or like, what kind of led you to that? Because changing the title of the film, enormous change, right? So kind of take me through that journey.
Sure. Yeah. So the short version was my executive producer, because it was going on PBS. He's like, PBS things always need a subtitle. And I don't remember if it was him or me. Somehow we came up with this subtitle, and then it worked its way into the promo material. And I remember even from when we launched and started promoting it on social media and having a few other larger Adirondack pages, giving them some marketing money to push it out there for us. Back in the day, there were a lot of hiking forums. I don't know if that's all shifted to Reddit or if it's still in those original web forums, but I remember just getting, as an 18-year-old kid, just getting like lit up on these forums.
Sure.
And it was my first experience of like, don't ever read the comments, because people were like, what, this kid thinks, who's he think he is? He's going to conquer the Adirondacks. Why is he qualified to tell this story? His name is Blake. That's the worst of the high peaks. I don't even like that name. This guy's a loser. Like all this stuff, right? And
it's so petty.
But it was so
hilarious.
good. It was so good. Like now in hindsight, so funny. But at 18, I was like, fragile ego.
Yeah, of course. And it's your first time, like you're putting yourself out there, and it's your first time you get something negative. It's like, oh no, it makes you question everything.
And obviously it's not even that, like nothing compared to what some people experience, but just initial shock of like, whoa, uh-oh.
Sure.
But then as I started to interview people, I found nobody talked like that. Like nobody used any kind of language around conquering or domineering or like taking over. And so very quickly we decided to drop the subtitle because it just didn't fit. And I actually went against the PBS grain because I just released the film as The 46ers. There is no subtitle. It's
way
just
to go, dude. Punk rock. I like it.
I like to be different. I think the closest example was at the time Ken Burns' National Parks series was out. And I referenced that in terms of my interview setup, but in terms of the way I shot everything else, not really. And our shooting style was also limited by the gear we had, which you don't have to get too technical on. But for the film nerds out there, it was, drones weren't really viable. And I'm grateful for that because of now the drone regulations.
Sure.
So retrospectively, that saved me. Gimbals were cumbersome and expensive, and motion control sliders were very expensive. Like everything was expensive and bulky by today's standards anyway. And so we had a cheap camera crane. We had one cinema grade camera that could do the broadcast quality in HD. And we had a cheap tripod and a couple GoPros. And like, that was it. So we made the film using those tools, and those limits, I think, force a certain visual style, but I like the language that it does because I don't see a lot of crane shots necessarily in documentary, especially lately. Everything's on a gimbal nowadays, or motion sliders were really in at the time, but I just couldn't afford it because the Kickstarter covered like the camera gear and the essentials we needed to record, and that was it.
Sure.
And it was volunteer time. So yeah, that was how all that came
You
together.
did what you could do with the tools that you had.
Exactly.
You made it work. Because again, it's not about, it's like if you watch a show and it's like visually like not that great, but the story is so good, nobody cares. Like it's about the story ultimately. And you were here to tell a story. And fortunately, like even a bad camera is going to look really nice out showcasing the Adirondack High Peaks. So talk to me a little bit about the challenges that you guys dealt with. I know you talked about bringing the crane up to Cascade. Making a movie and hauling camera gear anywhere, Pelican cases is hard enough, let alone climbing mountains with it. So talk to us about the actual production process in the mountains, not interviews, but like footage stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I realized very quickly, because when I was sitting on Marcy as a plucky 18-year-old looking out at this view, being like, I'm in Middle Earth. Like, why don't they shoot a feature film here? And then as soon as we started shooting, I realized, but it was one of those things, I tell people, like, I think I was too young and ignorant to know that you don't make a nationally broadcast theater ready feature documentary when you're in college, and especially in undergrad. And you definitely don't make a feature documentary about the Adirondack High Peaks, because there've been Adirondack films in the past, but I never felt like they captured the full sphere of the experience, and they didn't have the cinematic touch that I wanted. So I'm like, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I realized, oh, there's good reason that people don't do either of these things. And I'm doing both of them.
You learned quickly.
Yeah. And like you said, the humble pie from the mountains just kept giving because at the time our tripods were pretty heavy. So that's a bunch of weight on your back on top of, especially we started in March. So we were wintertime in Cascade and Porter. And we've got the camera in a backpack, lenses, batteries, a tripod, and that was like the light version of what we were traveling with. Then on those days you mentioned like Cascade in the summer, I had a camera crane like awkwardly strapped to my back for that entire hike. And then my dad was the poor soul that took on the literal dead weight, just plate weights that we had to use for counterweight, which is again is like the exact opposite of what you want to do when you're hiking.
Yeah.
Obviously in your fitness program, I'm sure if we'd had that at the time, we could have been a little more prepared for it, but we weren't thinking like that.
Yeah,
so
dude.
we just got slammed with that. And then the other challenges too is like the weather. As much as the weather conditions are difficult when you're just hiking and dealing with it, having to deal with camera equipment that's sensitive to moisture and temperature changes, like your batteries don't last as long when it's 20 below or whatever. Yep. All of those factors made it more complicated. And then the other factor of like, in order to get shots, I'd have to get really far ahead of a group of hikers, take 10 or 15 minutes to set up, then have them come through and film, let them pass by, and then pack up and then catch up to them. And so there was a lot of that. We shot in rain, we shot in mud, we shot with black flies, we shot in snow and whipping winds, we shot on blistering 80-degree days, we shot on freezing negative 20-degree days. We waited around for after sunset, so we'd wait till the sun was way down, like nautical twilight, and hike out in the dark. We'd hike in the dark at 3 a.m. so we could get sunrises, and just wait. A lot of it was like hurry up and wait, which is true of everything in film production.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's kind of exacerbated when you're standing, especially if your clothes get wet and you're just like, all right, we're going to just rough this out and not get hypothermia. But we did there were no serious injuries on the production except for I dislocated my knee 3 times. So that was kind of miserable.
To say that's not serious is
well,
like
nobody
hilarious.
had to be on crutches. Like nobody had a
course.
Laceration. Nobody had a heat stroke.
Sure.
Nobody got frostbite or hypothermia. Those are what I would consider really serious.
Definitely.
I was able to limp my way out, and each of those times it was just grueling. Like and so because of that, I still haven't finished my 46. I'm stuck at 18 or 19. It's going to be that lifelong journey of building back the strength to do them sequentially, but it was never my story. And that's what I always, people will kind of scoff a little bit that this kid who's never hiked all of them is telling the story. But I said, well, it's not my story.
Yep.
It's the story of the 46ers, the organization, the people that hike, and the mountains themselves. And it's not about me, which was very freeing in many ways.
Yeah, dude. It's funny you say that. So when I remember hearing that you had not climbed the 46 high peaks, I remember thinking at that time, like, how dare he? Who is this kid who made this film?
The audacity.
Yeah, dude. And it's funny. I think a lot of people probably have that at first. And then I actually ended up putting on, that was just like we'll call that my hiker cap. And then I put on my filmmaking cap and I said, yeah, because filmmakers don't tell their story.
Right.
Like, so I've had that kind of insight in my own brain.
Yeah.
You tell other people's stories. If you tell your story, it's like weird and pretentious. Like I guess I did with my own podcast, right? I told my own story.
But that's what podcasts are for, man.
Yeah, I guess so. The first season of my podcast, which was going to be the podcast period. There was not going to be extra episodes. Mm-hmm. It was my version of making a film. Instead of making a film, I made a podcast because I'm a sound guy. That's just like what we do. Yeah. But for the same reason you told other people's story because you wanted the story to come out. Mm-hmm. I told my story because I wanted to put other people, I wanted to be the person that they see themselves in going up these mountains for the first time. Like I'm just some Joe Schmo. The story just happens to be about me because it's the only story I know I can tell in, high detail because it was my story. But I want you to listen as you're driving up 87 to go hike Giant Rocky Peak Ridge. I want you to put yourself in my shoes as you listen and picture yourself doing these things, seeing these people. Because again, you took the same approach that like it's about the mountains and this like intangible thing that comes out of this journey.
Yeah.
It's not about, hey, look at what I did. It's about, look at what you can do and what these mountains do to people.
Yeah.
And I think your film captures that very well. And you had some great interviews with people throughout the film. So talk to us a little bit about like who did you interview in the films? Like what were some great things you learned throughout interviewing them? Let's hear about that.
Yeah. So that was funny too, because starting out, I didn't know the community because I was from Albany. I'd really only had limited exposure. And so it was a very organic process as the circle expanded of people that we got in touch with. One of the best contacts who's now been a lifelong family friend of ours is Dave and Terry, who own T-Max and Topo's Hostel. And they really helped plug us into the community because they were like, well, wait a minute, this is a good thing to tell this story, but we want to, they help support the film. David ended up being interviewed in it, and they were like, if we can help you connect to the right kinds of people, because it's not about racing up the mountains. It's not about checking off a list. And so from them, that expanded out. We got Ron Conowitz, who was the first to ski all the peaks and then has also been a volunteer rescuer. I got invited to the 46ers Skills Weekend, which is where I met Peter Fish and heard his safety lecture as this forest ranger in his 80s. And then his interview was really pivotal in the film for just this contextual thing. I forgot exactly how we ended up with Tony Goodwin, who's written many of the guidebooks up here. And then his father obviously was so pivotal in the guiding movement in the Adirondacks. So these pieces started to layer in. We got Julia Gorin, who at the time was the head of the Summit Steward program for 80K. And all of these pieces just started to fill in the story beyond just the personal transformation, but also how that affects a community. And I think that's what was really exciting about it. And then there were some individuals that I met along the way who were just regular people. They didn't have necessarily any special credentials, but I thought it was important to share those experiences as well. And there were also stories that we hoped to capture, and we filmed them and they looked great, and it just didn't fit the story. So we didn't, they hit the cutting room floor, as it happens. And then I think probably the most special interview I got was with Helen Menz, who was one of the original 46ers, who was hiking with Grace Hudowalski and helping Grace with the program of numbering everybody's things and receiving their letters. And Helen was just such a treasure. And I'm really, really grateful that she got to see the film at our Madison Theater screening in Albany before she passed away. And then after she passed away, I updated the film to have a tribute to her and in memory of her. So that's on all the versions of it now that exist. And what was so special about that night too was we announced that she was there, and she got a standing ovation from the room, which was just so
Very
special.
cool.
So to have these stories interwoven was great. One other little tidbit that helped, speaking of Grace Hudowalski, was there's a filmmaker named Fred Schwebel who had done a film about Grace before she passed, and also incorporated Ed Ketledge, who was so pivotal in the Summit restoration process. And he had footage of them, and he allowed me to use footage from his film. So I have these two little snippets from Grace and Ed that just elevate the whole story. And that's really was the story of the film, was people helping out this new filmmaker, being willing to support because the story was worth it. And people bought into telling the story of the high peaks, telling the story of the people that climb them. And really for me, the 46 high peaks are a character in the story. And when I worked with my composer, I wanted the main theme not to be the theme for the hikers, but for the mountains themselves.
Amen, baby. Talk about speaking my language, speaking to my soul. And that's the thing, dude. It's like you just go into this thing and you're like, I'm going to go climb some mountains. I'm going to go walk up this mountain. It's a cool view, right? It'll be cool out there. And then the mountains take over. Yeah. And like, you're not the same person coming down the mountains as you were coming up. And when you do it mountain after mountain after mountain, and you see like, you go to all these places that you've heard about, or you've read about online, your first time going up Blake, or your first time going through the floating logs, or, you finally go across the Cooksacrogga bog, and you have all these moments of like rite of passage, but also this is why people come out here. And they're just mountains, dude. They're just mountains in the woods. And there's something that's why I say there's magic in them. And your story completely resonates with me and what you're talking about right now, how it just like, it's about the mountains and you're just telling the story. For example, every single person that comes on the Summit sessions, the thing I say to them, I say, I'm not the star of the show. You're not the star of the show. The Adirondack Park is the star of the
Mm-hmm.
show. That's the goal of every episode. Make the park the star of the show.
Yeah.
And we do that by just telling the stories of the park, celebrating the park. And your movie does it super well. So talk to me a little bit about, like the role that the hiking community played in the film, before, during, and after the release, because this is also the type of community where how many Facebook groups exist with 20,000 members into it, talk to me about how the Adirondack hiking community, you've touched on it a little bit about a little hate from the forums and stuff. So they help shape it a little bit, but in general, and even since the film has come out, kind of how has the community been a part of this process for you?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, going through even just the process of how we found interviews was expanding the community and being deeper into it. And then having these community pillars as part of the project helped validate what we were doing, because people realized, oh, okay, well, if Tony's in it, if Julia's in it, if Pete Fish is in it,
it's okay.
It's okay. And this, how bad could this kid mess it up? I think was probably the thought, all right, how much can you mess up if you have these
it gave it street cred in a sense.
Yeah. And I think that then when I launched the first official trailer for it, that got people really hyped. So that had the first peek at the musical score. I was still using the aerial photography that was on loan to me from Mountain Lake PBS. I didn't have my own aerial photography until the end of 2014. And then that made it into the final trailer, which was really special. But the momentum built. We had 30,000 views on that trailer across different platforms, on each platform. So people were really excited about it. They were sharing it. And it just captured where the story was to that point. I think that community involvement was great. I also did something, I've since dropped off Instagram until the last month, which if anyone's been paying attention, I started ramping it back up again in anticipation.
Absolutely.
Of this
10-year anniversary.
The algorithm, man. But, and the screenings and some other exciting things coming up. But when I was launching it back then, the algorithm really, it rewarded, if you posted early and if you used hashtags. So I was really aggressive with that. And I had hashtag 46ers doc. And I would tell people hey, post hashtag 46ers doc on your Adirondack photos and I'll repost them. Because that was really big in 2013, 2015. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of that, which also was people felt involved in the storytelling, even though their photos weren't ending up in the movie, but they were involved in this project and this process. And then when we came to show the film in theaters, we sold out theaters across the state. So Plattsburgh, Lake Placid, Glens Falls, Albany, Syracuse, Rome, Rochester, even down in Brooklyn, and a few other screenings. I remember how it felt to sit at the Plattsburgh Strand Theater, one of those big old grand theaters with 600 people there, including at that time I just started working for the Lake Placid Tourism Office, Roost, and the CEO of Roost then, Jim McKenna, was there. And so I was showing off the Adirondacks and doing my intro spiel to this audience of 600 people in one time, which was just an amazing experience, the way people showed up. And then subsequently just seeing that people still engage with the page. Once we started reposting content, people started engaging immediately and sharing their stories. And that is really, every time that I write a caption for a post, it's all me doing it mostly. I'm trying to engage the audience. So I'll ask people to share their experiences, their stories. And it's really fun to see all of that continue to pour in. So I think that's the big picture. And then, like I mentioned, when the second trailer came out, people got really hyped about that because it was a little bit longer. It had more character to it. It had our aerial photography, which was shot from a helicopter with the doors off. And that was an interesting experience as a college student to have those shots. But one of my friends commented, who was a very, very talented cinematographer. I showed him this one shot. It's coming around Marcy at dawn, and the Great Range is starting to come in the background, and it's all silhouetted, and you have this spike ball lens flare of the sun, and the clouds are swirling, and you can see all the way out to Vermont, because it was just a crystal clear day. He goes, I think that's the furthest I've ever seen in any student film. And I was like, well, that's it, man. I want people to feel, I want to tell the story. I want to capture it and be truthful. I want to represent the conservation efforts, the safety needs, and the respect that you need to have for the mountains. But I also want people to feel the sense of awe and wonder, and to feel the magic of the mountains in the movie, whether they've never felt it before to get them excited, or whether they're reminiscing about their own Adirondack experiences, even if they weren't in the high peaks. I wanted people to feel that. And I got that feedback from people in the theaters, which was very encouraging.
Amazing, dude. 600 people in one theater to see something that you decided to tackle as just like some punk film student kid who wanted to like make a story, to see like, oh, there's actually people who care. These are all strangers. I don't know them.
Yeah.
They're connected to the mountains, but we have a connection now because I'm connected to them. You're connected to them. Let's go celebrate the mountains. What do you think? Like, if you had to attribute, you know, one aspect, like what was the one thing that you feel was the biggest thing that resonated with people that had you selling out theaters? Like, if you had to contribute this to kind of like one or two things, like why did the audience resonate well with this unknown filmmaker telling a story about something that people might know about but might not know about, but they, you know, selling out theaters across the state, like that's a big deal.
Yeah. I think the hype building up to it helped. So with Kickstarter, between Kickstarter and Indiegogo, we had about 500 backers. We'd built up the Facebook page to about 6,000 people, about 1,200 on Instagram. And so that helped because there was a built-in hunger for it. And people were waiting, because I would keep posting updates. I'd keep posting still photos behind the scenes, and people just were like hungry for the thing. They were ready. So the 2 years of anticipation, or 2.5 years, however long.
Sure. Good marketing. Good work.
Thank you. Yeah, that helped a lot. And then I think once people came, like why they came back to see it, why there was such positive word of mouth, was that capturing of the magic of being in the mountains. I think because of my style, my tone of voice, the way that I let shots breathe, now I work in commercial world and I'm cutting things into 30 and 15 seconds.
Cut. Yeah.
But I still have that discipline though of letting a shot sit for a static shot sit for 60 seconds and let the sound design, let the music fade out, no voiceover, and let the sound design fade in to just put you there. And I think letting the mountains speak in that way, you know, metaphorically, really worked. And then, as I mentioned, my composer's score, his Mountains Call theme, as I call it, because it's like, how do you capture the emotion of that ethereal, almost supernatural call that happens when you're literally just, it's physical exertion, you're in nature, but there's some other element that pulls people in.
Absolutely.
It's not just fitness training, and it's not just beautiful views, because otherwise people definitely wouldn't do all 46.
Sure. No, there's a mysterious quality to the mountains, and it's hard to articulate
so
what it is.
And I think capturing that emotion, I think that's what brought people back again and again. And I'm hoping that's what brings people back for the 10th anniversary.
Absolutely. So speaking of emotion, you went on this journey making this film, like throughout the actual course of the film, like how did it change you personally? We've been talking all about the mountains. Like, how did you change personally throughout this journey?
I don't want to take too long, but many ways. One of the big ones was I had like my first real heavy heartbreak, like shortly after announcing the film. And it wasn't just a heartbreak, it was also a close friend. So like, it was this really devastating emotional experience for an 18-year-old filmmaker, college student. Cause now like my friend, like my social circle was, all these things were going on. And that summer where we did the bulk of our initial filming, the summer of 2013, I spent a lot of time on the trail. And because of the nature of like having to set up, rush ahead of everybody, set up, film them, let them get ahead of me, and then catch up to them, I spent a lot of time on the trail alone. And I couldn't pinpoint a moment for you, James, but just through that process, I was a different person by the end of that first summer. And I came back to my college campus as a junior with this like confidence, and not an arrogance, not a cockiness, but the mountains had taught me about perseverance. They'd taught me about endurance. They'd taught me about resilience. And like, yeah, I can sit outside at night in the woods and not be panicked. My anxieties, you know, where my anxiety actually is doing what it was biologically wired to do, and that I can function under that. And also just the process of making something. I'm sure you express that too. Like once you do something, you do it repeatedly, and you find confidence in that. So I think that it built a lot of confidence. It also just totally transformed the way people perceived me. So like I mentioned, when I first launched the Kickstarter, they thought I was the most arrogant prick because, you know, who's this 18-year-old sophomore trying to raise, you know, 4 or 5 times what I can't even get for my student film. But as you mentioned, it wasn't because I was so great. It was because I was strategic and I was telling a story people cared about. As it went along, I also just matured as a filmmaker. My interests grew, my subtlety grew, my ability to like deliver things on set got better as well. So when I would work with other friends on student films, I just had a cool confidence. But yeah, I think the funniest thing for me was coming back from just that first summer, and all of a sudden everybody was like, oh, you're this, flannel wearing, like, backwoods mountain man. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm hiking Cascade and big. So in my mind, I'm like, these are not the real backcountry peaks. But to people that were totally green to the environment, they're like, whoa, oh man, we're doing this. And I think the other big emotional arc was just like, I was growing up, I was coming from being a young college student, basically a high school kid, because I graduated a year early. So I was young. I was getting humbled repeatedly by the mountains, which was very good for me. And I was learning from this community and getting drawn into this story. And then that had an impact on me because I'm reflecting on the experiences of other people and how to weave that into this narrative. I had like 24 hours of interviews to cut into this 1 hour film and like 100 hours of B-roll. And that also was really humbling and daunting. So I think all those factors swirled together to it made me a better filmmaker, it made me a better person, and it gave me a deeper understanding of my own, like, what am I? Because any kind of physical test, as you know very well, is going to reveal what's going on underneath. And it'll grow you, but it's also whittling away your excuses. It's whittling away your defenses and your facades. You can't hide who you are from yourself when you're 10 miles out on a trail and your knee goes out. Like, you can't, who you are and also who the people in your life are show up in those moments. And I think being exposed to that early in life gave me a solid foundation that served me very well over these last 10 years. I don't know if that answers what you're just saying.
Dude, it's absolutely amazing. Growth in the mountains is ultimately what occurred for you. Like, that's your story, as not just making the film, but what you did, what you experienced personally in the mountains led to you then showing up as a filmmaker in a, more confident manner. And then back at school, and like everything stems back to what you learned about yourself in those peaks, on those trails, in those woods. And it seeped into the other aspects of your life at that time. Magic, absolute magic. Now, what was it like for, what did your professors and what did your fellow students think of, like, you, who's also doing like an actual film? Like, how did that dynamic go?
No, it was fun. So again, like I said, once that initial semester passed and I came back with proof of, like, I'm actually doing this.
You're doing it. It's off to the races.
Then it became a hype machine on campus as well.
Cool. And
people were like, when's it happen? Because student film, the turnaround on student films is either they're buried forever or they're done in a couple of weeks, usually, maybe a semester. So it's very odd to have a project that lasts for 2 or 3 years. And I remember I used every opportunity I could to use things I was learning on the film to fulfill coursework, just because I was like, I don't have the bandwidth, and nothing I'm going to shoot in Virginia Beach is going to come close to what I'm doing up there. So there were still projects I had to fulfill, but a lot of times for editing or cinematography projects, I'd pull things I was doing.
Smart man.
In my script, and then when I had to screenplay and format it, I had to go through all the interviews, so I used that as well. But my professors were really helpful and encouraging, and challenged me in helpful ways. And then I remember my senior year, final semester, they had like a big film festival they did every year. None of the films I'd ever submitted had made it in. And then I submitted a 10-minute preview of the 46ers, and that got in. And awesome. I remember that was my first taste of the theater experience that would then come. That was 2015. So then come later in August, where that would start. And over the next couple months, I'd show the film in a different theater every weekend. But they announced it, and I remembered the announcer mentioning, this highly anticipated, like, multiple years in the making, because at this point it was a small campus, so everybody on the campus in the film program knew what I was doing, and nobody had seen anything beyond a trailer. So when they announced, this sneak preview of the 46ers film, like, for me, I'm sure it was subjective, but it felt and sounded like San Diego Comic-Con back in early Marvel days when they would announce the title of a new movie, just the way the place erupted. And then people watched it. Then I came up and gave a really, like, I memorized this speech and I had it down, and it was like part reflection, part sermon, part like sales pitch. It was like the whole nine, and kind of defined the way that I speak publicly a lot in many ways. And that to me was a really great validation of the effort, because I turned down a lot of things to do this. One of my only regrets, and I say regret very loosely, is that I don't really have a big portfolio of experimentation in student film. So now when I have experimented in genres or things, it's been with money attached or out of my own pocket. And so the risk taking in that factor is higher. Where like student film, okay, maybe my grade hurts, but it's not going to impact my career if my student film isn't great. Now I'm like, no, I'm working for clients in commercial world. Like I have to deliver on time, on budget, and it has to meet their expectations or hopefully exceed them. So that's like one thing I in some ways I wish I'd had more time, but on the flip side, I wouldn't be who I am or where I am if I hadn't committed to this process that was grueling. I mean, my health really took a toll though, because I was keeping a full course load, keeping my grades up for scholarship. I worked 2 jobs, and then on like breaks, long weekends, I would drive 10 hours home, film in the mountains over a weekend, drive back. And doing that over a couple of years, like it definitely took a toll on me. And I still don't think to this day I've fully recovered. So that's where the, getting back into fitness, and my wife and I are working on eating better and balancing life out has been fantastic for me. But I didn't know what balance was then. And, and at the same time, when you're 18, you really shouldn't be balanced. You should be going full speed ahead of the things that are going to build a foundation. And so I'm so glad that I did that. But yeah, it's an interesting journey.
Yeah, dude, you learn to grind, you learn to persevere and to do hard things, keep going. Yeah. It's exciting. So it's 2025, 10 years later.
Yeah.
The film's coming back to theaters. Talk to us a little bit about what we can expect there. Where could people see it? Kind of talk to us about this re-release.
Yeah, so I'm really thrilled to bring the film back for its 10th anniversary, and coinciding with the 100th anniversary of Herb Clark and the Marshall Brothers finishing the 46. It's this nice confluence. We're kicking off June 14th at the LPCA in Lake Placid, limited seating. So definitely go to the 46ersfilm.com and check out our screenings page to get your tickets if you want to go. We're also going to be in Syracuse, New York, Plattsburgh, New York, and we are, as of this recording, working on Rome, New York, Rochester, New York, Albany, New York, Glens Falls, Buffalo. And those are just some of the ones that we might do as live events where I'll be there and we'll have a table. We'll have some special limited edition DVDs and Blu-rays with a bunch of new features. We'll have posters, we'll have merch. And it's just fun to meet people. I love talking to people. It's always a good time. And then we're also going to be just running the film in theaters around the state, wherever they'll have us. So check frequently on the 46ers Film page if you want to see it, because our hope is that for anyone in the state who's interested, and even in the bordering states, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, that there will be theaters that'll be showing the film for a limited time, and you'll have the opportunity to go see it. Because really, like, I know people joke about like watching Oppenheimer on an iPhone the way Chris Nolan intended, but there really is something about films that are framed for the big screen. And for all of the ways that I've grown as a storyteller, I'm still really proud of every frame of the film. And we absolutely shot it with the intention of it being projected on a 40, 50, 60-foot screen. And the sound studio absolutely designed the sound to sit in a theater. So it really is a unique experience. I don't know if at the 20 year, if we'll bring it back, or, who knows if we'll even have movie theaters then. I hope so. But I would say, like, if you have any interest, even if you've seen it, like, it's worth seeing on the big screen, because one, the visuals and the music and the sound all just hit different than that you're going to get at home. And also that communal experience. I think what's so fun is going with friends. And then afterwards, you talk about the movie, but more than that, what I found in 2015 was people would talk about their own experiences. It would bring back memories for people of their own journey. And so you go with your friends and get stirred up about your own experiences and get excited to go back out and do something again. Like, I think that's the real power of storytelling to me. And that's what's so exciting to get to share with people.
It inspires people, and they see themselves in what you've created. And that's how you're making the customer the hero. That's how you're making it about other people, which is then about the mountains. Yeah, man. Awesome stuff, dude. How awesome is it too when you see something that you worked on, like, on the big screen in like the movie theater? It's a great
nothing
feeling,
like it. It does not get old, that feeling of, especially seeing it with an audience and hearing people laugh at the right time, and kind of feeling that you can feel the emotional energy in the room when the sad parts of the film hit.
Yeah.
And then when there's funny parts, or like, startling part, people reacting to the film is like such a cool emotional experience.
Yep. It's always exciting seeing movies I did like at the movie theater. It hits differently than when you see it on streaming or your TV. It's just something about the being at the theater, the big sound, the seats, the popcorn, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Very cool. So now you have something else you're working on. Talk to us a little bit about some this new project you got going here.
Yeah. So this has been brewing for a while. From the time that the theater screenings were done, I've contemplated doing a sequel, but it always felt like it would be either a cheap cash grab or I wouldn't really have anything else to say about the story. And after I worked on the film, I worked for Roost in Lake Placid for 2 years, visually representing Hamilton, Franklin, and Essex County. So that really expanded my horizons about the Adirondack experience. I got exposed to the cycling, the Ironman world, all the water sports, all the winter sliding sports, the Olympic hopefuls, the farms and the local communities and the small businesses. And because of that, I was like, well, I don't know if I have the energy to do a whole other like feature length film. And I also don't want to cheapen what I've already done. So I put it off. And then finally, over the last year, I've spent a lot of time up here investing into a new project that you're actually a part of in a way. And I am trying to tell a series of short Adirondack stories. So it's going to be Patreon based. So monthly subscription to get insights behind the scenes. And then at certain patron tiers, they'll get to have a say directly in what stories we tell next, which I'm very excited to have that level of community involvement and response. But the goal right now, just because of the pace and the cost of producing things, is to do it quarterly, but with a hope to do it more frequently because there's so many stories. I've already filmed one with a climbing guide, one with someone deeply connected to the Adirondack stewardship world, about to interview someone deeply connected to the mountains in a different way. And I've spent time with ice climbers and kayakers and just getting a lot of footage of the Adirondacks. So I'm really excited about this new format of storytelling and this community involved way. And that's also going to be over at the 46ersfilm.com/legacy. You'll see the screenings there and also the Patreon information. So if people are interested, super fun, like low pressure. The Kickstarter was very high pressure and crowdfunding is very exhausting work. I think Patreon will be, it's in it for the long haul because there's so many stories to be told here. And my producer and I were actually reflecting on this as PBS changes, like they were kind of the bastion of quality storytelling. Now it's coming into individuals. And so I feel this is an opportunity to help tell quality regional stories. And there's nowhere I love more than the Adirondacks. And there's so many people and places here that I want to capture, whether that's a documentary or a narrative or something that's more ethereal and poetic. I think telling those stories is going to be exciting. Current plan, this could change, but current plan is to release them exclusively on Patreon at first. And then eventually the films will be out on YouTube for the public to watch. So that's the goal right now. But yeah, I'm excited about what the future holds.
It's great, dude. You're continuing to tell stories about the mountains, about the people here, about this park, this crazy park that we've all seemed
it's
to
a wild experiment.
taken to, right?
Yeah,
I love it. Very cool. So that's the 46ersfilm.com is where all the information is for you for there. So now where can people find tickets to buy, to go to the theaters, go to the screenings? You know, obviously the 46ersfilm.com is going to have the info, but make sure, I don't want people to miss out where they actually can support and go see the movie.
Yeah. So since I'm a small business, I'm also doing all the web development, but my plan is to have a calendar view and a list and maybe a map view as well with links to the theaters to buy tickets from. And also I'm planning to put a form on there. By the time this airs, it might already be up there, where people can request, like get information from their local movie theater and request the film. Because
I love that.
Like if you don't want to drive 50 miles to the nearest screening, but you have a small independent theater, I'm trying to stay away from the chains because I think that like Regal and AMC are going to be, I'm going to have a much harder time getting into their rotation.
Sure.
So I'm looking for the local mom and pop, like support local business, support independent filmmaking, and just like dive into Adirondack experience and spend an hour with friends and family just immersed in the Adirondacks and remember your own memories and get hyped up about your next adventure.
I love it. Very cool, man. So as we start to wrap things up here, there's always 3 questions I like to ask everybody that comes on this podcast. So I'm going to ask you as well. The first question is, what is something that's unique to you that you always carry in your backpack when you go hiking? But for you, I'm going to change that. Tell us a unique story about you hauling equipment, filmmaking equipment somewhere in the high peaks? There's got to be a story that hits in your mind when I say that. Tell us that story.
So it comes back to Cascade, man. I mean, there's so many other ones, but that was just so egregious and ridiculous to be like, all right, so we're gonna carry a camera crane on my back.
And for those who don't know what a camera crane is, tell us what a camera crane is.
So it's a piece of equipment. In this case, it was a cheap one, so it was like on a stand, and then it pivots, so the camera can go from really low to the ground and go up like 10 feet in the air. But in order to achieve that, you also need to bring counterweights. So we had counterweights in backpacks, which again, super counterproductive unless you're trying to do something grueling and grindy. Like,
yeah, unless you're a great range athlete on purpose, you probably don't want to haul weights up a mountain.
No. And even one as like gentle as Cascade. And then the other, to make it even more just exhilarating was, we met at the trailhead at 2 a.m. because my goal was to have this gorgeous sunrise. And I was so ready. I'm like, all right, the crane's going to come up from one of the rocks on Cascade. We're going to reveal this group of 8 hikers who were doing a through hike of the Adirondacks. They were all teenagers. It was part of a summer camp program where they just through hiked all summer. And they were finishing on Cascade. So I'm like, great, I'm going to get their finish. We're going to have the sun coming up behind him and the crane's going to come up, reveal the sun, reveal the hikers. This is going to be the marquee shot for the movie. And I had people from Albany, people from Plattsburgh, all met there at 2 a.m. So most of us, left our homes at midnight. Like, we were not well rested, and we hiked up and we could see Lake Placid from the first outcropping on the way up Cascade. And we're like, great. It's clear. We could see the stars, went back in the tree line. Then when we broke out of tree line, we were in a cloud, and we got to the summit of Cascade and broke out the camera gear, and sunrise came and we were in a cloud. And my poor hiking friends were waiting down there. I'm like, just wait another half hour, guys, please, because I really want this shot. And then it wasn't going to happen. I couldn't hold these poor kids in this weather. So they come up, and actually I'm very, in the grand scheme of things, I'm grateful for it. But now the shot is camera cranes up from the rock, and you see these guys just getting battered by the wind in this socked in cloud as they hike up to the summit. And then my crew was going to mutiny, I think, because I kept insisting that we stay. And this was the only hike my executive producer joined me on. He was not a hiker, and he was cold, and everybody was cold and wet and tired. And here I am like, no, guys, just stay a little longer. I know you've been up since midnight, and it's now like 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. and we just hiked a mountain carrying all this weight. But no, let's just stay a little longer. And right as they were about to turn on me, Carl Heilman, the Adirondack photography legend, like emerges like an apparition out of the fog and comes up as he had come up from his home. And he said, oh, I was thinking the conditions would be better today, but let's just wait it out. So then everybody's mood changed. We wait. We had like plastic bags over the cameras because the moisture was so intense. And then suddenly this big gust of wind blew the cloud off the summit, and we were exposed 360-degree views, a total inversion. So we had, we were above the clouds and blue skies in every direction. And suddenly it was like a cartoon, the way everybody scattered around the summit to shoot all these scenes. So that was a really, really special day, and just an egregious example of like carrying this ridiculous shaped thing. And also I should note the camera crane, like I just put it in its bag. So it was just like those webbing straps. It wasn't like a backpack. And a couple miles of that it was definitely awkward. And it was, I think, 4 or 5 feet tall in the bag. So carrying it was just really uncomfortable, but it was worth, I was committed. I was the one who carried it. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I need this for this shot. And that was really because I didn't have the aerial photography for a while. That was the moment that really like solidified the visual identity of the film. Awesome.
You were the leader that day, having to do what the leader does. So, dude, there's so many Verplank Colvin vibes coming from you that day. I don't know if you guys don't know about Verplank Colvin, the great Adirondack surveyor, but his crew many times were turning on him, and he's like, no, we got to keep going. We got to keep going. But that's what the leader does. Yep. So I got major Verplank Colvin vibes as you were telling me that story. And additionally, talk about life lessons that the mountains taught you that day about, hey, we just got to wait out a little longer. And then look what happens, because you didn't give up when it wasn't looking good. You didn't give up when it was hard. You didn't quit. Oh, it's not what I wanted. No, you waited it out, and then you were rewarded for waiting it out. Like, again, a life lesson learned in the mountains to not quit, to persevere. Yeah. And another prime example of how these mountains will teach you that.
Yeah, man. No, and you said it perfectly there. So I'll just add a little note on that. It's like, there were other times where, like when I hiked Haystack, that did not clear up at all. And we were in the rain and the clouds, and then when we crossed the water, like, and I got on the other side of that, that's when my knee went out, and then I had to limp all the way back to JBL. And then the next day we had to limp all the way back out of there. And so I also learned that you're not always rewarded for your hard work, but you do it anyway. And I think that those combinations of things really were formative. But yeah, that particular day definitely rewarded perseverance, and it rewarded the grit of the team. And also it taught me that, which has been a mainstay of mine, I'm definitely not, if I was to place myself alongside other like directors, not to be pretentious, but I'm definitely not David Fincher in that I'm not trying to precisely and pristinely exactly execute my vision, because I understand the environment is going to change. I understand that, you know, the weather is going to give me maybe not what I wanted, but what I needed. And that day was the prime example, because that shot of them coming up fits perfectly with what one of my interviewees said. And I hadn't interviewed him at the time. I interviewed him later on, and he talked about it. It's not all perfect days, but it's about the experience in the community and persevering. And you're not just, you know, always in the sun and 70 degrees. And so that shot that we got, that I was really hoping to be the marquee shot, ended up being so critical to tell the story I was trying to communicate.
So awesome. There's always a lesson to be learned as long as you're looking for it, and as long as you actually absorb the message the mountains have for you that day. Awesome. So next question.
Yeah.
Why is the Adirondacks a unique place? In your mind, what makes this park, this community, this hiking community, the mountains, etc., like what makes it unique?
So many things. I think on a pragmatic level, just the unique blend of public and private land, this land experiment with a lot of new growth, given all the fires and the logging that had happened a century ago and change. So it's a testament to that symbiosis of people living really close to the wild nature and having vibrant community, I think is really amazing. It also, in one of my Patreon stories, when I have when that's rolling and I have time to edit it and the support to get it done, one of the points that came out was how amazing the conservation, like how we reversed negative things by the things that organizations and state agencies have done in the park, which is really incredible for the world we live in. And then I think there's just something ethereal and mysterious about these old rock formations it's not the Rockies, but it's also definitely not a walk in the park, pun intended. And I think that physical challenge, the kind of ethereal natural beauty, and this weird call of the mountains that like I just can't, I always feel like I'm home when I come back up here, even though I like literally lived up here. But even before then, I feel like I'm coming to a place that's just home, and it's hard to put a value on that, or hard to sum that up. I think that's really unique. And then I guess the final thing would be just the way that the community is so involved in the preservation of the idea of the Adirondack, like that forever wild idea. Obviously it's written into the law, it's part of the framework, but it also really informs the way people live here and the way people play here. And I think that's really unique and special.
Yeah, the Forever Wild ethos is alive and well in the park, and it's very cool. Great answer, by the way. I loved everything that you just said. So my final question is, and normally I ask people like, why do you hike? Why do you put yourself in these hard places where like no one's making you do that? No one's making you go out there. I'm going to change it for you.
Yeah.
Why do you feel the need to tell the stories of the mountains, to tell the stories of the people, to tell the stories of the Adirondacks? Because that's what you're doing. You're telling the stories. So why do you feel that these stories need to be told?
That's a really good question. I think a couple things. People need to see inspirational stories, but not cheesy stuff. I'm not into sensationalism. I'm not into just trying to ramp up the views or go viral. I think people want something that's a little bit more transcendent and lasting than that. And to me, the Adirondacks are a perfect canvas for that. And not just a canvas, but a character in the story. I think that's another piece, is I feel connected to this landscape in a way that I don't to the mountains in Vermont, New Hampshire, or other places I visit. I mean, the Smoky Mountains are beautiful, but I don't have any emotional connection to them. Maybe I will someday, but the Adirondacks for me just have this allure I also think like I've reflected on this a lot as I've started thinking about this Patreon series. There are people, and you're right in these circles, that are much more like really risk-taking, adventure-y, like way out deep in the backcountry. I know some of these guys that are out like the guys that do the Wild Planet stuff and sit for 2 weeks in a box in silence just to get a shot of a bird or something. Like, I couldn't do that. I'm not built like that. And I know that about myself. So there's those guys, and those are a whole different breed. I know there are people that are probably more contemporized documentary filmmakers than me. And there's probably people, in this like maybe trifecta of things, like a little more outdoorsy, people who are more Adirondack savvy than me, who live here and have lived here their whole lives. But I think at the intersection of all those things, I'm probably the person at least that I know that best hits the filmmaking ability, the passion for the place, and the knowledge of the place. And I think that rare combination puts me in a unique place to tell these stories visually. And also I have my own visual style. So even if somebody else checked all those boxes, our films aren't going to be the same. Our story sensibilities aren't going to be the same. I've never been a trend chaser. I, for better or worse, like just struggle with trends, but I think that I hope that gives my work a more lasting piece. And I think the Adirondacks deserve that. I don't think the Adirondacks deserve trend chasing and TikTok dances and like, whatever the latest hype is or meme, even though that stuff's hilarious. There's some guys in the Northeast that are doing really funny stuff on Instagram, but like, so no shade to them, but that's just not me. I want to tell these lasting stories that are human stories, that are about growth and change and transformation and humility and perseverance and all these things that are really deep values of mine. And I think they resonate with other people. I mean, I hope they do. We'll see. But the 46ers film was proof positive to me that people do care. And I think giving people giving audiences a reward for their concern and their care is something that drives me. So. Yeah.
Well, I'm one of those people that resonates with all of those things. I think that's probably why we've connected on a personal level so well as our, our view of this park and what it brings to the table for people ultimately, and why like telling the story of the park is more important than anything else to highlight it. Yeah, great stuff. So where can people find you online, Blake?
So I am on Instagram at Blake Cort. I'm semi-active there. My portfolio website is blakecortright.com. I do have a form there if people want to get in touch with me, or, if people have ideas for things. You can check out the Patreon. Go to the 46ersfilm.com/legacy. Patreon link will be there. Mostly because by the time of this recording, I haven't really just picked a name for the series yet. So once again, it's going to be one of those things, I think, listening to the landscape and listening to the community that's going to shape it. And I'm totally open to that. So for now, it'll probably just be the 46ers, but 46ersfilm.com/legacy. Join in the Patreon and throw in your voice. Like, tell me, what are the stories that people really want to hear? Because clearly people had an interest in the 46 High Peaks. I'm curious about ice climbers and people that are doing these like long paddles through the park, or backcountry camping, or that are starting a business, or that are continuing a generational business, or people that moved out of the city and bought land and started a farmstead. Like, these are so fascinating to me, and I'm excited about the opportunity to give each story its own care. But yeah, that's really the main areas where people can get in touch with me. I try to keep my social media life pretty personal, but then my like public facing stuff, I do engage with people, and I try to. I also have a YouTube channel. It's at Blake Cortright, and that's pretty active as well. So yeah, any of those places, super fun.
All right, very good. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Summit Sessions here on the 46 of 46 podcast. Make sure you guys check out the 46ers film 10th anniversary re-release coming to theaters this summer. Head over to the 46ersfilm.com and get all your information there. Thank you to Blake for coming on the podcast right here at Shed Quarters, and thank you to you for listening to this episode of the Summit Sessions. Tune back in on Fridays for new mountains, new stories, new guests, and new episodes right here on the 46 of 46 podcast. Head over to 46outdoors.com to see all the different ways I can help you have a safe and successful Adirondack adventure, whether it's helping you get in shape for the mountains or it's giving you the information that you need to know. Head over to 46outdoors.com. Lots of stuff for you there. But that'll do it. Remember to always leave no trace, do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. See you on the trails, Blake.
See you there.